Hey everybody, what's up and welcome to yet another week of the Illuminerdi's post-credits MCU recap show. My name is Richard Nebens. I'm going to be your host for the next 6 weeks here and then following on with all the other Disney Plus shows from Marvel Studios. Now this week is the first week of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is our next MCU project in Phase 4. We had WandaVision Weekly for our first run. This one is New Cap Recap. Obviously because of everything that's happening in this show, which we're about to get into right now with episode 1, which is titled New World Order. And you'll see why once you watch this episode. Side note, if you haven't watched this episode yet, stop watching me. Go watch the first episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It is awesome. You're going to love it. If you loved the Captain America movies, First Avenger, Winter Soldier, Civil War, anything with Cap in it, you are going to love the start of this series. It's a little bit slow to start. I don't want to use the word slow, but I can't think of another word to say besides that. But we get a ton of good stuff. It's full of character development for both Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes, who have both, played supporting roles through their time in the MCU. I mean, Bucky's been around since 2011 in the first Avenger, Captain America, and Sam was introduced in the Winter Soldier in 2014. So they're both MCU veterans, but this is the first time that we've gotten a starring role for both of them, and it comes in the same series with the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now, we start off in this series after the awesome Marvel logo once again, which I just absolutely love that there is the classic MCU Marvel logo in front of these TV shows, as always. We get Sam looking like he's about ready to go to some kind of either somber or sad event. We can't tell if it's a funeral or what, but he's got Cap's shield, just like he did at the end of Avengers Endgame after Steve, passed the torch and the mantle of Captain America along to him. And they've got that quote from the end of that movie in there where Steve's asking how it feels, and Sam says like it belongs to someone else, or like it's someone else's is the exact words. And Steve tells him it isn't. So Steve is ready to pass the mantle of Captain America onto Sam, but Sam's obviously still worried and not sure exactly about taking it. And then we see him go on this awesome mission, in Tunisia, Libya, facing off these guys called the LAF, which I think is the Lebanese Allied Forces, I think, which feel free to correct me on that if I'm wrong. But anyways, so we get Sam in his classic Falcon outfit, and we get some of the best action in Phase 4 so far, and it comes right in the first episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now, this series was the one that I was actually most excited for when all these series were first announced at San Diego Comic-Con D23 in 2019. And, this series is delivering on that early. We've got Henry Jackman's awesome score, the same guy who composed the music for both Winter Soldier and Civil War. So we've got that theme kind of going through, and then the action is awesome. We get Sam flying around. This is the coolest Sam Wilson has ever looked as the Falcon. The wings are super cool. We find out later that they are still Stark tech, even though Tony is gone and dead. And then Sam ends up facing not only the LAF, but George Batroc, who was in Captain America the Winter Soldier. Steve fought him in the beginning of that movie, and now Sam is fighting him again in the beginning of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It's played by George St. Pierre, the amazingly talented MMA fighter, one of the greatest. We get him again, and it's this awesome fight sequence between him, Sam, and all of his Goonies. And Sam is rescuing this guy from the military, along with this guy Torres, who he'll be an interesting character to watch out for. I think it's played by Danny Ramirez, the U.S. Air Force guy Torres. And now in the comics, he actually becomes the Falcon at one point when Sam takes the mantle of Captain America. So it'll be interesting to see if the show goes that same route for Torres in this show as they do in the comics. Now, after getting everything done in that mission, they're in Libya, and Sam's actually speaking Arabic to the locals, who are thanking him for being an Avenger, saving all their lives and everything. And he's, loving life, being an Avenger and everything. But then things get a little bit more somber when Sam goes back to Washington. He's giving a press conference or a speech to a bunch of people at the Smithsonian, which again comes back from the Captain America the Winter Soldier. This show just in general has so many connections to the Captain America franchise. Obviously it was expected because it features two characters that were Steve Rogers' best friends, Bucky Barnes through his childhood and Sam Wilson, obviously, as they became Avengers together. But I love all the references back to the Captain America franchise in this. And Sam is giving that speech along with the Shield. We see Rhodey in the audience, which is awesome. We get a little bit more Don Cheadle as James Rhodes. We don't get a ton of him in this show, but it'll be interesting to find out if he comes back in episodes 2 through 6. Maybe they'll set up something for Armor Wars. I don't know for sure, but just thinking off the top of my head. But anyway, Sam ends up saying that he's basically not ready to be Captain America yet, and he doesn't think anybody should be Captain America outside of Steve Rogers. And now that he's gone, we don't know if he's dead or just retired, missing, living his life, whatever. But he is out for the count. He has given this shield to Sam, but Sam doesn't think that there should be a Captain America, so he gives it back to the Smithsonian, which is honestly gonna bite him in the ass later. I'll get to that a little bit later, but we see Sam and Rhodey talking about everything, and Rhodey's wondering why he didn't take up the mantle, obviously for the reasons that I was just giving. But Rhodey said they'll be in touch, and then we see Sam, going back to some other stuff later. But first, we have to get to a little bit of Bucky Barnes action, the co-star of this series, Sebastian Stan. I mean, he has been a staple in the MCU for going on a decade. And I've been so excited to see this version of Bucky Barnes in this series, because this is the first time really since Captain America, the First Avenger, that we get to see Bucky Barnes in his right mind, being the person that he maybe wants to be, and, free from the Hydra control that he was under in both Winter Soldier and Civil War. He took the sabbatical in Wakanda, went on ice again to try to get his mind right, which he mentions to his therapist. And he's in therapy trying to make everything right. And he's trying to seem like he makes amends for all the wrongs that he's done as the Winter Soldier. We get a flashback of him, killing somebody on a mission that he had a nightmare about. And then that's what he's talking to his therapist about, who's the same therapist that we've seen in the Super Bowl trailer with both Sam and Bucky. So I can't wait to find out what that's about later, their whole staring contest thing, later on. I figure that won't be till episode maybe 3 or 4 or something. But Bucky's going through all that, and he's basically just saying this is a guy that's been going from one fight to another for 90 years. I mean, he's 106 years old. He's basically been a soldier, either willing or mostly unwilling for the vast majority of his life. So he's not exactly sure what he wants or what he even can do now that he's a free man. He's been pardoned, thankfully, for everything he did as the Winter Soldier. And then we see him, going out to lunch with this guy, Yori, at this Japanese restaurant. And Yori's talking about this guy, he's actually talking about his son who was killed mysteriously, which obviously sets a really, really dark tone for Bucky because, knowing what Bucky did, you can imagine what comes next. But then Yori sets him up with this girl who's working there, and then they end up going on a date later on and, playing Battleship, doing beers. And, the date is actually really interesting, too, because, this is a girl who gets into some deep, deep stuff on a first date. She's asking Bucky about his history, about his parents, about his family and everything. And then, she mentioned this whole thing about how, somebody who lost their spouse is a widower, someone who lost their parents is an orphan, but there's no word for anybody who loses a child, and which is exactly what happened to Yori. And that, triggers Bucky, obviously because of what we find out later. And then we go back to more stuff with Sam. We get to see a little bit of his home life, which he lives in Louisiana, which is also cool because Anthony Mackie himself is from New Orleans. So we get that little connection. And then I love the fact that when we meet up with, we actually meet up with his sister and his nephews, his sister Sarah, who is from the comics also. Hopefully we'll get some more on her later in the series. But the kids come up to him and are yelling, Uncle Sam, which obviously he is their uncle. His name is Sam. But it's a great connection to the whole Sam becoming Captain America thing, which really early on, we don't get the impression that he's going to become Captain America instantly, obviously, because he's still the Falcon and he's still working as the Falcon. But this whole series, I think, is going to be leading up to how Sam becomes Captain America, how he becomes okay with taking the Captain America mantle on for himself, following in the footsteps of Steve Rogers. And then, so anyway, we see Sam talking with his sister Sarah, and she has been really, really struggling because apparently she didn't, she lived on through the blip, and Sam didn't, obviously, neither did Bucky. But she's been trying to just keep her business afloat. They have their parents' business, which we don't know exactly what their parents do yet, but apparently their dad was a huge thing in Louisiana. He was a mogul, a big shot, somebody like that. So I'll be really interested to see, what more we get of Sam Wilson's backstory, going on in this series. We get more with Sarah. She's talking about selling this boat, but that apparently that they grew up on, the whole time. And Sam's trying to convince her not to sell it, be able to get a loan and stuff to be able to consolidate all their assets. And this show is really interesting too, because this is some of the most real stuff that the MCU has ever gotten into. I mean, the MCU has obviously done real emotional moments, and they've done a great job at that. But this is some real life stuff. I mean, people trying to keep their businesses alive, especially through, their own version of a global pandemic, obviously losing half the universe for 5 years and having everybody come back, which Sam mentions in his speech. But it's really interesting to see how they deal with that. And, obviously the tension that's going on between Sam and Sarah Wilson. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of mend their relationship going forward. But, so anyway, so Sam and Sarah, Sam sets up an appointment to try to get a loan from the bank, their family bank that they've banked with for generations. And this guy there, I mean, he starts off cool because he, thinks he recognizes Sam from playing football at LSU or something. And then he does the whole wings thing, realizes he's a Falcon. But that, still it doesn't help them at all because, everything with the blip that happened, people don't have financials for 5 years of their lives. And then it's a really tough situation for, banks to deal with and the government and everything. And Sam and Sarah are just trying to get a loan for some money to save their family and save their business and everything. And Sam's even trying to use his connections as the Falcon, which, obviously turns not that great when, this guy doesn't give him a loan, but still asks Sam for a selfie, which obviously not a cool move. And Sam's just really trying to help Sarah. I really hope that she lets him help her at some point during the series, just being able to save everything that they've worked so hard for, because a lot of it is what people are going through now. And then anyway, so we get a lot of that action. We get a lot of good character development with Sam and Bucky. We don't actually get a ton of other people in this series. I mean, we got Rhodey for about 5 minutes. We get Sarah, which is awesome. We get the girl that that Bucky's going out with. Sorry. It'll be interesting to see how that happens, because how that ends up is that Bucky is trying to make amends with Yori because in a nightmare that Bucky had, he ended up actually killing Yori's son, which really happened. And Yori didn't know how that turned out. And Bucky obviously hasn't admitted it to him yet. But that'll be really interesting to see if he comes back, if Bucky actually gets to make amends with him. And then the episode ends with a really, really interesting, press conference from the Department of Defense, from Washington, D.C. and everything. And we get the guy who Sam actually gave the shield back to in the beginning at the Smithsonian on screen, giving this press conference. And this is where things get really, really nerve-wracking and suspicious from here, because Sam gave the shield back because he didn't think anybody should be Captain America, and that the world doesn't need that kind of hero. The world needs new heroes. I mean, obviously we're getting those later in the MCU, but Sam thought it was time to retire the mantle of Captain America rather than take it on himself. But then this sumbitch, goes on and they make a new Captain America. They introduce a new hero specifically for America because, the Avengers are just all about saving the world and whatever. And then we get Wyatt Russell's U.S. agent for the first time. And then that's where this show ends, with just a shot of his smug little face, and he's holding the Cap shield, and he's got the suit on, and nobody really likes him, honestly. All the reactions I've seen so far from this first episode, nobody is enjoying that this U.S. agent guy got the shield instead of Sam Wilson, who Steve Rogers personally gave it to. So that's going to be really interesting. And then the episode ends actually with Sam and Bucky not even having met up with each other. Bucky's been ignoring the calls from Sam, as his therapist points out. I don't know if they're resentful at each other because it's been about 5 or 6 months since the end of Endgame in its MCU timeline. Whereas WandaVision took place 3 weeks after the blip, Spider-Man: Far From Home took place 8 months after it. We get about a 5 or 6 month gap between the end events of Avengers: Endgame and the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now, what I'm really looking forward to for this next episode is obviously Sam and Bucky meeting up for the first time again, because they've got to figure out this whole U.S. agent stuff, and then there's all the Flag Smasher stuff, which I didn't even really get to, with the Flag Smashers and Batroc, and there is just a ton of stuff that they have to get to all around the world, because the world is obviously in chaos. The Flag Smashers basically believed that the world was better during the blip, when half the universe was gone. So their motivations are going to be really interesting to find out. Torres was in there. He got the crap beat out of him by one of the leaders of the Flag Smashers before the press conference to introduce U.S. Agent. And, Sam and Bucky are going to have a lot to deal with outside of their own relationship, whatever that turns out to be. And then we still haven't seen any of Sharon Carter. We know she's on the run after the Accord stuff and everything. We haven't seen her since Captain America: Civil War. Another guy we haven't seen since Captain America: Civil War is one of the main villains of this show, Daniel Bruhl's Helmut Zemo. He is still to this date one of the only villains in the MCU who actually accomplished his mission. He tore the Avengers apart in Captain America: Civil War. Now, we don't know if he blipped. We don't know what he's been up to for the last 5 to 7 years since the events of Captain America: Civil War, but he looks like a man on a mission when we see him in the trailers and the stuff we hear him say during the trailers. So I'm really excited to get more Zemo and see what happens with him. Now, going on to the production design and everything for this show, as I mentioned before, absolutely top-notch stuff from the MCU. I mean, the cinematography looks amazing. The special effects are awesome. I love the way that they shot Sam in action. The full frontal face shot as he was spinning around, flying through the mountains and everything. And I can't wait for more Bucky action, obviously, because all we got from him was that flashback scene where he killed Yuri's son. But obviously the cinematography was great. The music was fantastic by Henry Jackman once again. I mean, great job by him. I mean, the staff behind this series is absolutely amazing. Director Kari Skoglund, head writer Malcolm Spellman. Obviously, the acting was great. And we are in for an absolutely fantastic series coming up with The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I cannot wait for episode 2. I actually did see this first episode about a week ago also during doing the press stuff for the Illuminerdi for The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but I have not seen anything else outside of the trailers that have been released and the couple of clips and everything. So I absolutely can't wait to find out what happens in the next 5 weeks of this episode. Now, I want to pose this question to all my viewers on Twitter. You can follow me there at @rnebens, and I want to see what character are you guys most looking forward to seeing in the next episode or two of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Is it Sharon Carter? Is it Helmut Zemo? Is it any of the other guys that we've been rumored to hear about? We've got Isaiah Bradley coming in potentially. We've got Patriot. I want to know from you guys. I want you guys to, at me on Twitter and let me know who you think we are most looking forward to seeing in the next few episodes of The Falcon Winter Soldier. Thank you guys so much again for joining me for this crazy ride. I will be here for every single week of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier and all these Disney Plus shows that are coming out later into 2021. You can also catch me on the live watch-alongs with the Illuminerdi with Braxton Timberlake, Caitlin Tyrell, TC, all those guys. And we'll be doing a live watch-along for every new episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier and all these shows going forward. Thank you guys again so much for joining me, and I can't wait to see you guys next week for episode 2 of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I'll see you guys soon. This is New Cap Recap.